Hello. Bueno, buenos días a todos.
Good morning or good afternoon, good night, depending on the country, but it's a pleasure for me to be here welcoming you in this One Welfare conference. It's an honor for me also to introduce next keynote delivered by Daniela Battaglia, a friend of mine for a long time. So it's a great pleasure. Then we will have oral presentations where you can make the questions that you like. And after that, we are going to have some sessions for OWSM sessions with no questions. So without further ado, I'm going to give the floor to Daniela Battaglia, a representative of the Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO, and is going to talk about sustainable food systems and climate change. It's my pleasure to introduce Daniela, to welcome you and to give the floor to you. Thank you.
Tan linda y muchas gracias también a los organizadores para invitarnos.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction and for inviting me.
Because that's what has been agreed with the organizer, and that's also my presentation is in English. But if there is going to be any question in Spanish, I will be happy to reply in Spanish as well. I will try to share my screen now to start with the presentation. In the meantime, good morning, afternoon, evening to everybody, as we got used to say with these new virtual modalities to work. And I have just to concentrate on the presentation now. It takes a few seconds. It was the same when we tested, but I hope it's going to be all right. Yeah, I think it works, right? Okay, so I'm going to start giving a little bit of information on how livestock and animal source food systems and the sustainability of the whole sector are linked, and focusing a little bit more on the climate change. So first of all, just to give a little bit of perspective, what has happened in the last years is a huge increase in the production of product of animal origin, animal source food. This has mainly been driven by the increase of world population. We're now almost 8 billion, and this number is expected to increase by 2030 and 2050 and reaching 9.8 billion. The majority of this growth will happen in Africa. So it's expected that around by now 2 billion of growth will be in Africa. And it's also very interesting to know how this population is distributed. For the time being, almost 54% of the population is urbanized, but this number is expected to increase, and is expected to reach 60% by 2030 and continue to increase. It's also interesting to note that by 2030, it's expected that 54% of the population will be in Asia. Now, okay. Okay, so this together, so this increase of population with this increase of urbanization and also increase of people income has been some of the major causes of an increase of animal source food consumption and therefore production. So you can see there what has happened in the latest years and what is expected to happen from now, let's say, to 2030. So this growth is expected to change. We have calculated that in the last 30 years, there's been an increase of meat, eggs, and milk of 300%. And this is expected to continue, but at the less with the less importance, and this is expected to be around 33% by 2030, increase in meat production and 33% in milk production and around 19% in meat production. And again, this is mainly expected in the so-called developing countries. I'm sorry to use that word because I don't think it's very meaningful, but for the time being, I don't have another word that more or less explains what I mean to say. So another interesting point is which kind of animal sourced food has increased mostly, and it's poultry meat. So that's also to give us an indication on which sector we have to concentrate our effort if we want that the impact, the one welfare impact, especially for what regards the animals, is more meaningful. So the sector that has increased, and these are also expected to increase the most, is the poultry sector. What is also interesting to note that in the latest years, with the increase of production, the livestock production has also hugely intensified and industrialized. So the number of production units has enormously decreased, and the size of the scale has increased. So for instance, the graph shows that with the increasing of GDPs of countries. So that the graph just want to show how, for instance, the backyard children, the extensive children production has decreased with increasing of the GDPs in countries. Now, with this huge increase of the livestock sector, of course, there have been positive opportunities, especially for those people in the countries, and we calculate about 1 billion that depend on them as a source of livelihood, also of income, but also as a social status, cultural identity, and so on. But of course, as you all know, this has come with a high cost in terms of food safety, public and animal health and welfare, environmental degradation, and climate change. You have been exposed to the sequence of zoonosis, so directly connected the animal health and the human health diseases. We calculate that 70% of human diseases have animal origin, and this without taking into account also COVID-19, on which the sources are not 100% established. So we'll leave that out for the time being. But still, even without taking into account the COVID-19, there is a huge correlation there. And this has come up to the major papers and the media, and that also given a quite a bad image to the livestock sector, which is unfortunate for those people who depend directly on them. I'm not talking about the big multinationals and so on, but the large number of people, especially in low and medium income countries, that really benefit from livestock production. Again, with intensification of livestock production, we have seen a huge increase of use of antimicrobials, and that come also with an increase of resistance to those antimicrobials, creating not only a huge problem for human health, and it's calculated nowadays that around 700,000 people die every year because of diseases which are resistant to the current antimicrobials available, but also a lot of problems in the animals themselves. Animals that are suffering from diseases and cannot be cured because the relevant veterinary drugs or antiparasitic drugs also have become resistant. So again, something that we have to take very seriously into account, and we have to address properly. The negative impact on environment, again, I think very much well known by now, in terms not only in terms of anthropogenic greenhouse gases emissions, which are caused, it's calculated around 14% by livestock production, but also in terms of natural resources which are used. And we are going to come back to those numbers and what could be done to address these issues, but just to give a wide overview for the time being. So now this all brings us to the Sustainable Development Goals that were defined by United Nations as also connected with taking care of many important public goals for the future. And I would like to show now how livestock is connected to many of these SDGs, but also how through welfare, but more particular welfare, we can address those and we can make a positive impact on those. So FAO has studied quite in depth this connection. So has done a specific publication, but also a whole series of events, just to look at how the livestock sector could be beneficial for people, the animals, and the planet. And again, especially what animal welfare can do for that. So I will just, I have selected maybe the most important SDGs, although to be honest, I think that the livestock sector and one welfare and animal welfare may have an impact on the all 17 of those. So we all know that currently there are far too many undernourished people and also far too many overweight, and that's nowadays, it should be unacceptable. This graph shows a little bit that while, I mean, how the food consumption is distributed and is different in the different world regions, and especially the animal protein. So how, as in certain region, is exceeding, for instance, what is recommended by WHO, the World Health Organization. In some other region is still very low. And this can cause a lot of human health problems. We have calculated that nowadays around 1/3 of pregnant women in Asia and Africa suffer of anemia, and 1/4 of children are stunted and have also a psychological and physical deficit due to lack of protein, animal protein, especially when they're under 4. Of course, this is mainly happens because in this particular situation, this lack of availability of a varied and rich diet that could supply, for instance, valuable protein also through legumes and other food. So animal protein becomes even more important in those situations. But how animal welfare in particular can contribute to that? Well, for instance, it can reduce, and I'm not going to go into the technical specificities, but I don't think we have time, but because of increasing the efficiency of productivities, because of decreasing the losses, for instance, at a slaughter or due to bad transport of animals, can increase the number of food which is produced by single animal, can reduce the wastes and the losses, for instance, due to downgrading and the injured carcasses. So that will make available more protein available to the people who would need that. And for instance, in case of working animals, and I've heard a lot speaking about those in the morning, they, as you know better than me, they have a huge contribution to agricultural production. So again, they can directly, with better health, better welfare, and better physical the capabilities, that could contribute even more to agricultural production. Let's look at another SDG, the number 1 and number 8, poverty, economic growth. So now that I think there's some background noise, maybe. Yeah, thank you. So we know that there are around 800 people living under the poverty threshold, which is $1.9 per day. And again, this is not acceptable nowadays, but we know that livestock sector contribute over roughly, and on average 40% of the out of the agriculture sector to the GDP and growth. So again, there is a direct correlation on improving and increasing the efficiency of the livestock sector through better practices and through higher animal welfare that makes animals more resistant, more resilient, in better shape, and producing more. So how the sector could contribute in producing more food and contribute in producing more income for those people. Again, as I was saying, there are around 1 billion people that depend on them. So again, so this is summarizing what I was saying. Animals that are in better shape, healthier, and welfare will also reduce the production costs and increase the profit for the farmers. Sorry. And they can enhance also the domestic market and trade, international trade, because of complying with international established animal welfare standards. So overall, they can boost the income of small-scale livestock production and contributing to their economic and livelihood well-being. Looking at another important SDG, the number 3, good health and well-being. As I was saying, zoonosis, emerging diseases, pandemic, treat. And again, I don't want even to take into account COVID-19, but it could be one of those that should be taken under consideration, are becoming more and more important. And with those, also the overuse and misuse of antimicrobials, as I was mentioning before. This is just to give you an idea on how antimicrobials are used only in animal production in the world. And as you know, they are not only used to treat diseases, but more and more also to prevent and to increase growth and productivities. So especially this last use to increase growth could be very well decreased, if not abolished altogether, in many countries, in many production systems, just taking better care of our animals, better nutrition, better housing, better hygiene, and of course, also very much better welfare. So the animal welfare not only increase improves the immune systems of animals which are stressed and under pain, have a lower immune systems, so that makes them more prone to get diseases. So their resistance would in turn decrease the need to use veterinary drugs and antimicrobials. So it could in turn contribute also to the slowdown of the development of antimicrobial resistance. And also, as you know, animals which are under stress and with biological pathogens transferred to animal source food, normally under stress would shed those pathogens through their feces into the food. So again, and with also other in animal source food. So again, better welfare would also reduce the risk of contamination of animal source food. Now we look a little bit more closely at the natural resources use and climate change. That's been calculated that 2.5 billion of hectares are currently used to produce feed, animal feed, which in turn has to be used by animals. But it has also been taken into account that 2/3 of this land has no use for human nutrition, so to produce food that could be consumed directly by human beings because of being in mountainous areas, marginal lands. So in a way, yes, it's true that a lot of land is used for livestock production, but it's also true that this land would have no alternative use. And a lot of times by grassland production and pasture, we can maintain the soil, avoid degradation, erosion, and so on. So we have to look at the double aspect. And so overall, the 40% of global arable land is used for livestock production. When we look at the efficient use of resources of nutrient cycling, it has been calculated that around 7.1 gigatons of CO2s are produced by livestock. And again, this is roughly, depending on the area, depending on the production systems, 14.5 anthropogenic, the 14.5% of anthropogenic greenhouse gas emission. Very serious, very negative, but again, with the right practice, and in the right production system, we are able, and with the knowledge we have now, we are able to decrease this livestock impact. And again, animal welfare practices can play a major role. They can improve the efficiency of livestock, so therefore making system using more efficient, so using less natural resources. And also the studies that have proved how the animal welfare can also, higher animal welfare can decrease methane emission. I will show you a graph later. So this brings me to the second part of the talk, so looking a little bit more at climate change. What are the direct impact of climate change into livestock production and also the well-being and the health of the animals? Well, the direct impact, which is the changing weather patterns, so increased temperature, and as you know, that might become even too high for animals to be in a comfortable state in many areas of the world. Altered precipitation patterns, more and more we hear about flooding in one area and extreme dryness and drought in another one. And again, this, as you know, can have a direct negative impact on the animals. Melting glacier, rising sea level, ocean warming, acidification with the consequences with marine animals, and as I was saying, a more frequent extreme weather condition. There is also indirect impact, that the changes in water availability, also the quality of water, more and more the water is too high in salinity. So again, a problem for our animals. Vectors, parasitic, for instance, vectors can expand they're present, again, being a problem, or even other pathogens, and being a problem for animals. And again, social and economic disruption that have an impact on the farmers, on the people caring for those animals. So an indirect impact also on animals. As I was saying, disease emergencies in animal and the human-animal interface because of higher temperature in many areas of the world, that would increase the presence of pests, endo and ectoparasites, but also feed-borne pathogens. So in a change in the distribution of those pathogens, so we can find them in new territories and in new production systems, or they could turn more aggressive, more dangerous, both for animals and the human beings, and jump more from one species to another. What could have happened for COVID-19 virus? So whenever, because also climate change or also unfortunately other anthropogenic actions, animals areas are restricted, it's more easily that pathogens can spread more within those animals and jump from one species to another. So this is give in a different version, in a graphical version, a little bit all the interconnection that and the impact that the climate change can have. And so, as I was saying, enhances of introduction of new diseases and pathogens, impact on the demography of humans and animals, so more of encroachment also between human and animals living in a certain area. Influence of disease ecology and pathogen evolution, also more hazard in feed, for instance, and as a consequence of all this, also more use of antimicrobials with increased antimicrobial resistance. Just to give an example of aflatoxin contamination, which can easily contaminate feed, be transferred to animals, create problems in animals, and also being transferred from animals to food of animal origin, and again, causing problems of food safety. So you can say how through the years, the presence of aflatoxin as in maize, or this is only maize, has increased in Europe due to higher temperature and also higher humidity due to climate change. But what we can do to cope and what we can do to mitigate the negative impact, of course, preventive veterinary medicine is very important. Animals with higher welfare are, as I was saying before, more resistant, more resilient to pathogens and to diseases. So again, making them able to cope more, even with the negative consequences of climate change, adjustment in animal production system, and also social resilience. When we look at the production system, when we improve sanitation, hygiene, biosecurity, we will in turn improve the health well-being of the animals, but also of the people who will in turn consume the food originating and the people who are dealing with them, using more adapted genetic resources, which again are more resilient and resistant not only to diseases, but also, for instance, to heat stress or to climate conditions which are not optimal, improve the animal nutrition, the feeding practices, ensuring in any case the welfare, but also addressing the ecological resilience and developing new strategies, for instance, through certain and livestock sector policies and practices reduce the impact on environmental degradation and greenhouse gas emission. Now, boosting the efficiency of the livestock production will in turn decrease the amount of resources used. Carbon sequestration through improved grazing management, the quality of pasture, the animal nutrition, again, can contribute to decreasing the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere, and so therefore also having a good positive impact on climate change, and better livestock integration in the circular economy, the so-called circular agriculture, while we intensify the recycling of agriculture, byproducts or co-products, for instance, of certain new feed sources like insects that in turn could be fed on or other substrata, and minimizing the losses. So this is the graph I was mentioning before that shows animals with higher welfare, therefore with low cortisol. As we know, the cortisol is a direct sign of the stress of the animals, could in turn reduce the methane production. So one of the several studies that are showing the link between higher welfare animals and the lower greenhouse gases production or other chemicals and other substances increasing climate change as methane. And again, for instance, it has been shown in many situations how silvopastoral systems, agroforestry, the linking livestock sector with the forestal production may decrease the greenhouse gas production and have a positive impact in the effort to contain climate change. Now, so social resilience is also very important. Since we're talking about one welfare, we want to show all the facets of the welfare, so not only the animal one, so empowering the communities vis-a-vis the health production of the animals and their own health production in with what concern specific pathogens increasing by climate change is very important. Strengthening the overall animal and public health systems and infrastructure, community-based health outreach, participatory surveillance and control, behavioral changes that can contribute a lot to raising awareness and, if we want, nudging people, both farmers and the other people living close to the animals or having a negative impact by climate change. And as I was saying, sustainable improvement in the food and especially the livestock production systems. How the one welfare approach can help us towards this objective. Okay, it helps us in dealing with the complex risk factors as a whole. It is acting at natural and farming, not only farming landscape, but also natural one, on the land use, maintenance of biodiversity, on farms, slaughterhouses, processing. So it helps us in addressing the whole agricultural sector and the food production sector. It brings together all health professionals and welfare professionals, so the vet, public health, food safety professionals, agriculture, forestry, fishery, and so on, and helps in removing the divide among those disciplines. Now, again, some conclusion more specific for what regards climate change and how we can help in trying to decrease it. Again, looking at forward-looking approaches, horizon scanning, doing foresight, sharing all reliable information among all professionals and all involved in these sectors, recognizing One Health as a global common good, and calling for international solidarity and cooperation for the implementation on One Welfare measures, being sustainable and resilient animal production systems, strengthening the health systems, and also countries across the world act as a whole to develop relevant policies and face the global threat. In the specific matter we are discussing in these 2 days, I think we can all recognize that One Welfare is an excellent framework to address most of the objectives I have been mentioned, and to promote and address the connection between animal health and welfare, public health, human well-being, and the social and physical environment. So it allows us to ensure that not only animal welfare, but human well-being, but also the well-being on the environment and society as a whole are not forgotten. And it allows us also to identify better and to highlight not only the shortcomings of the problems, but also how our animals and the livestock sector as a whole can be also beneficial in terms of food security, nutritional, social, economic, and environmental terms. Just not to give you a little bit very final information of some of the examples, because it would be too much to give you the whole overview of what FAO is doing and which kind of tools is making available to address some of those problems. So specifically for climate change, FAO has developed a whole range of publications, scientific studies, and technical strategies and tools that can address climate change and make livestock and the animals part of the solution, not of the problems. And it's also having a whole range of activities in terms of training, capacity development, and so on, to implement those practices. Also, for instance, what came out yesterday, I think, or before yesterday, is a new study of FAO together with other UN partners, UNEP, UNDP, and the OECD. So it's a study that is really looking how financing in the wrong way agricultural development can create a problem, while using the financing and the policy decisions could instead nudge for farmers and producers towards better way to produce from a sustainable point of view. And just to give you a very quick idea, I haven't read the whole report because I said it came out only yesterday, but just picking from what I read so far. So, if we would be able to shift a support from that would distort the agriculture production, for instance, it would support harmful forms of livestock production. We would target measure that would improve the sustainability of the sector, and for instance, having specific credit programs that promote sustainable livestock practices that would increase animal welfare, for instance, that would increase biodiversity, support the restoration of degraded land, supporting, for instance, implementation of organic production system. We could in turn move towards direct direction. And again, instead of providing subsidies or providing support to all kind of production systems, supporting only those, for instance, that by choice of livestock would choose those animals which are more resistant and resilient to diseases, to climate stress, to heat stress, for instance, rather than the commercial breeds which are mainly used. And they would improve certain kind of nutrition and health consideration. So just to give some example of what is suggested in the report as advice to policymakers and especially to financial institutions. Again, FAO believes very much in collaboration and partnerships. We believe that given the difficulties ahead of us, only if we join hands we can try to solve those problems. So we especially addressing one welfare, we consider that only through partnership we can have a meaningful impact. And as intergovernmental organization, we are in a unique role to facilitate dialogue and collaboration between the private sector and the governmental institution, between the civil society and academia. So really acting as that independent platform to enhance dialogue and collaboration. Just to give an example of what we are busy now through partnership, we are developing and we're applying the One Health approach in animal welfare good practices and agricultural development is and activities we engaged with the World Bank, World Animal Net, that was the formal name of the World Partnership for Animals, Wageningen University Research, and OIE, I think I mentioned before. And we're really getting together to provide the actors of development, our technical partners and civil society, getting together to collect good practices for higher welfare in addressing also the other objectives of One Welfare, and especially applying in the context of low and middle income countries. But also we are getting together already through several years to organize World Conference on Farm Animal Welfare. And I'm putting this slide, which is out of date, just to inform that we were planning to have the fourth conference at that time in 2020, and also the second FAO Global Multi-Stakeholder Forum on Animal Welfare, which would have again applied more the One Health welfare concept. Because of the COVID-19 emergency, we decided not to go virtual because we believe that this kind of events would be a huge opportunity for networking, getting together in person, exchanges experience and developing a collaborative experience. So we have reported this meeting to next year, when hopefully we'll be able to travel again, to meet again, and make the best use. So save the date for the time being. It's not the one on display. It's going to be sometime in 2022. We will inform you in due time, but just to let you know that this is what we have been preparing for a while. And with this one, I will like to thank you again very much for your attention, and I will be available to your questions in a written format if necessary. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, Daniela, por tu excelente
Thank
presentación.
you, Daniela, for your excellent presentation, as usual. We have a couple of questions. If we have time, we are going to ask the questions and then you answer them later. How do you see the relation between the increase of the efficiency of farm animals and their well-being, as it is the case of rapid growth poultry or pellets? It's a good question.
In English or Spanish? In English.
In English?
Already thank you for the question. I think there is already awareness on the problem that this kind of intensification, and especially applied in the genetic selection, for instance, of this kind of animals, are posed to animal welfare. And that is because of those awareness, and because also of a push of civil society, even consumers, that are become available of those problems, and especially in certain countries and in certain regions of the world, are not prepared to accept that kind of food anymore. There is already a different trend. And for instance, in many countries of the world, like we mentioned the Netherlands, but not only, there is a decision to go for slower growing birds that will not present that kind of productivity, and we can call it efficiency, but efficiency only from one point of view. So moving towards different kind of selection that would allow our welfare. So there has been already a recognition of the problem and the change in production practices. So now the problem will be making that knowledge available also to other production systems, to other countries, and enabling them to follow the trend. Over.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Daniela. Hay algunas otras
Thank you, Daniela. There are more questions, but maybe since we don't have much time, you can write to or answer to the questions that you can be asked later. We are going to move on to next presentation, the oral presentation section. We are going to speak about the understanding, the mobility and mortality of pigs in Ugandan smallholder production systems. Rebecca Doyle is in the program, but I think that Peter Oba is going to be the presenter. It's going to be a pleasure to have you here.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm making this presentation on behalf of our colleagues, Rebecca Doyle, who is the animal welfare scientist at the University of Melbourne, and also a scientist at the International Livestock Research Institute. Zachary Nsada, lecturer at Makerere University, College of Veterinary Medicine, Kampala, Uganda, and Michelle Dione, who is the scientist epidemiology at the International Livestock Research Institute in Dakar, Senegal. The title of our presentation is Understanding Mortality and Morbidity of Pigs in Ugandan Smallholder Pig Production Systems. Before we share with you our presentation, we'd like to give you a short background to Uganda's More Pork Phase 2 project. This project is titled Improving Pig Productivity and Incomes through an Environmental and Sustainable and Gender-Inclusive Integrated Intervention Package. The focus of this project, or the goal of this project, is to improve productivity, efficiency, and also to develop the market systems of the pig value chain in Uganda. This is basically through delivering a suite or a package of technologies that are designed to improve, to address constraints to pig production and productivity in Uganda. This project has 4 major components. There is a component on feeds and forages that will address the constraints of nutrition. There is a component of animal health, which we directly fall under. And then there is a component of improving breeding and artificial insemination so that farmers can access quality genetics. And the last component is on livelihood improvements, but also enabling the value chain actors to access better markets through market systems development. Under the animal health component, the focus is to design animal health interventions to minimize disease and also improve or increase performance of herds in the pig value chain. We also aim to minimize or reduce the usage of antimicrobials through improving hygiene, pig welfare in general, biosecurity, and health practices. So, based on this, we designed an assessment tool to establish the current status of pig welfare in Uganda and how farmers actually understand the concept of pig welfare and its relationship with pig productivity. We conducted this survey in April and May this year, and we focused on understanding all key indicators of pig welfare that have been established in other countries. We focused on looking at housing, how farmers design houses, and how those houses affected performance of pigs. We looked at animal welfare practices. We also looked at health practices and all other indicators of welfare in terms of what facilities farmers provided to the pigs. At this point in time, we would like to share with you our preliminary findings. We were able to interview a total of 270 farmers in the project sites, and this showed that the results showed that the average farm size was 6. Farmers kept average of 6 pigs, with a range of 3 to about 100 pigs. In Uganda, farmers considered that keep actually above 100 are considered to be large-scale farmers. So these are mainly smallholder producers. The number of sows kept per farm was 3, with a range of 1 to 20. So farmers that kept beyond 20 were considered to be quite large-scale, which is quite different from what happens in other countries. In terms of mortality, up to 33% Ugandan pig farmers experience more than 20% mortality in piglets, which is quite high because they to be high if we compare to other countries in the region. And then also 10% of the farms experience more than 20% mortality in winners, and a similar proportion, which is 11% of the farms, experience more than 20% mortality in grower pigs. In terms of mortality in sows, only 3.5% of the farms experienced sow mortality. This findings showed that overall about slightly more than 50%, which is 57.5% of the farms experience mortality of one or the other type of pig in their herds. And then in terms of morbidity, or the proportion of pigs that were recorded to be sick or clinically sick, the percentage of farms with the piglet morbidity was high, nearly 50%, which is 48% of the pig farms. And then the percentage of farms with greater than 20% winner morbidity was 23%. And then the percentage of farms with morbidity in growers was quite lower, was 5.4%. This showed that overall the morbidity was up to 76% of farms. That's about 3/4 of the farms experience morbidity in their pigs. What are the impacts of mortality and morbidity on food production losses, as well as its implication on pig welfare in general? We all know that in terms of food losses, in terms of deaths of pigs, for example, the farmers lose the pigs, and also there's a problem of tissue contamination when pigs are taken to the slaughter facilities, and then this definitely affects the volume of pork that is delivered to the market. In terms of morbidity or the sickness in pigs, this of course also increases the cost of production to the farmers, and this affects their revenue. And then illness itself, even mortality, also has adverse effect on general pig welfare and also the health of humans that are attending to these pigs. And then we also found out that in some cases farmers did not observe withdrawal periods of drugs that are administered to the pigs. So some of the pigs ended up in the human food value chain, which has adverse implications on antimicrobial resistance. And then, of course, all this has negative effects on overall food security and also food safety. what um, is our approach towards addressing the challenge of pig welfare in Uganda. We want to design interventions that aim to demonstrate to farmers the economic impacts or the economic benefits that can be derived from improving pig welfare in general, because we know that when pigs are kept well, when pig welfare is improved, then it has a positive impact on pig productivity. So we want to demonstrate this in terms of improving weight gains, so that the farmers can really appreciate that if we improve the welfare of pigs, then the pigs are likely to grow better. It also has implication on the volume of antimicrobials that are used for treating sick pigs. And then this of course definitely also affects it has a positive bearing on their profit margins, and which of course also ultimately affects improves human health, because if medicines do not end up in the food value chain, then the problem of antimicrobial resistance is mitigated. So this is all within the context of one health. We want to be able to demonstrate to farmers that this linkage of human health, environmental health, and animal health has a bearing on human health, and the integration of it's a system thinking. The integration of the different components actually within the concept of one health ultimately improves animal welfare, but also has a positive bearing on human health. We'd like to thank all of you. We'd like to acknowledge the conference organizers for giving us the opportunity to present this work, the sponsors, and also our national partners in Uganda who are supporting us in the implementation of the MOPOG Phase 2 project in Uganda. Thank you very much for all of you, for your audience and time, for allowing us to present this work. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Peter. Muchas gracias, Peter. Vamos entonces.
Thank you. We are very, we have to respect the timetable, the schedule. There are no questions now, but if there are more questions in the future, you can answer them in writing. But I now have to move on to the next presentation, which is foot and mouth and similar transboundary animal diseases, dealing with psychological aspects and public perceptions. This is going to be presented by Rodrigo Nova from the European Commission for the Control of Foot and Mouth Disease. The headquarters are in Italy. I don't know whether we have the person who is going to introduce this presentation. Rodrigo, are you here? Thank you.
Hello. I'm Rodrigo Nova from the European Commission for the Control of Foot and Mouth Disease, EUFMD. And I would like to talk to you today about a training course that we delivered earlier this year called Foot and Mouth and Similar Transboundary Animal Diseases, FAST, Crisis Management, dealing with psychological aspects and public perceptions. So for those of you who don't know, the EUFMD is a commission of the Food and Agriculture Organization, FAO, based in the headquarters in Rome. And we have 39 member nations, most of them in Europe. And we deliver a training program that aims to enhance preparedness in order to counter the threat of foot and mouth and similar transboundary animal diseases. Now, a lot of the training that we deliver, it is focusing in technical aspects of disease control. However, we shouldn't leave unnoticed some wider effects in animals and humans when we are trying to control these diseases. If we look at literature, and this is a very small glimpse, focusing only on foot and mouth disease, 2001 outbreak in Netherlands, in the UK, and 2010 in Japan, we can see that there is a recognition of the human welfare impact that animal disease control can have. Some of the extracts from these publications are mentioning communication problems perceived by the people involved, feelings like stress and burden in the people here involved in the disease control, either being affected by the choline or being responsible for it, and then from where the support may come. And interestingly, farmers, at least in these articles, they are mentioning that they rely more in the conversation with the veterinarian rather than going for formalized welfare support. And recommendations in this paper talk about how the emergency response team should be trained regularly in order to be able to provide support, or at least basic support, but also to understand how these activities may affect them. So we carry out a focus group with a representative from the veterinary services of our member nations to discuss about these topics and to see if there was a perceived need on training. So when we talk with them, they identify 4 different groups: a field veterinarian, farmer, the general public, and contingency planner, and sort of issues that may raise when dealing with animal disease crisis management. And this range from ethical conflict, difficult conversations for the veterinarians, also physical demands from the farmer to also in a way for veterinarians to understand the psychological impact of this disease control on the farmer, and for vets also how to deal with activists in communication and some other areas too. And then the need of integrate those aspects in contingency planner, particularly because they recognize that there is the need to have a frame for well-being of the veterinarians and the response team in order to have a crisis management, or the management of a crisis in an appropriate manner, efficiently, and protecting animal welfare. Considering all of the information, we define learning objectives for a proposed training course, and then and these learning objectives focusing in 4 areas: the ethical aspects, the resilience of the veterinary services, communication path, and then how to integrate all this in contingency planning. We look for partners, and our partners included the Center of Expertise on Animal Disease Outbreaks at the University of Edinburgh, the Veterinary Defense Society trainer, and VetMedi Uni Vienna in Austria. And the delivery was organized as a virtual workshop containing live sessions, pre-recorded material, small group discussions in Zoom, group tasks with case scenarios, and also the submission of reflective pieces. We had 85 participants from 19 different countries attending this training course. When discussing with them, a lot of the aspects focus in all this ethics, communication, and well-being on the stress that different stakeholders will be feeling as a result of managing a disease crisis, particularly because of the cooling and carcass disposal, the socioeconomic impact, and affecting the livelihood of people. And these problems add to things that stress that could be a normal day by day, like trying to manage between daily responsibilities and work, but then adding to extra hours working, physical work, maybe the lack of knowledge, depending on the communication, the flow of communication and the information available, public perceptions and criticism from the public when operating cooling activities, and the dealing with the conflict, with the difficult situation as well. And how much these stressors may affect could be influenced by support networks, control influence, and knowledge and preparation, and that they could reduce by activities that you can have a day by day, like exercise, recognizing self-awareness of you being affected, but also from support within the organization. And this was really important because when also analyzing more closely the information and the submission from the participants, we noticed that they recognize animal welfare as one of the main causes of stress that they will suffer, the veterinarians will suffer during animal disease control. So being able to safeguard animal welfare during cleaning activities should prevent undue stress to anyone who witness or performs such activities. But in order to safeguard this animal welfare, you need to have a team that is resilient, that is well supported, and where stress can be minimized. We know that they will be suffering ethical dilemmas when working in the population of healthy animals. We know, and they do recognize, that veterinary services should select appropriate communication techniques with dealing with animal disease control. But overall, the discussions and the proposal from the participants is that the veterinary services should provide the resources and opportunities to reduce the stress of the personnel involved in the population activities. Because again, this reduction of stress will facilitate the performance of the task in an appropriate manner, which at the same time will reflect in safeguarding animal welfare during the population activities. Participants' feedback was very positive at the end of the course. Most of them find that the course was appropriate, was quite novel for them, that it raised awareness about how to improve resilience. These are actually examples of the written feedback. And then it was interesting to hear comments like talking about resilience, as often there is no culture to do so. And that, I have to say, was very valuable anyway, because we were working with 19 different countries. And for some of the countries, these concepts are not necessarily resilience, but the support to the team and the well-being of the team working in a situation of an animal health crisis, it was already embedded in their contingency planning, but it wasn't done for all of them. And the course itself, of course, was a way in which they could get stressed and be nervous when we were discussing these topics openly in groups regarding stress levels and resilience. Just have to say, there is no culture to do so. What's next, though, it is to check what was the impact. I mean, we know that the training was well received, but we need to know, or we would like to know, if this have had or will have any effect in the contingency plans where these concepts could be included. So as a standard for our procedure for training courses, in a year's time, we will be doing a post training feedback survey in order to gather information and see if there have been any change on the contingency planning. And also we need to continue with the conversation with the veterinary services of our member nations to see if there is a need for follow-up with this training, and particularly we are producing some standalone training material for them, particularly regarding communication and well-being. So you can follow UFMD activities in our social media, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, etc. And other than that, thank you very much for your attention, and I'm open for questions. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Rodrigo, por tu excelente presentación.
Thank you, Rodrigo. That was an excellent presentation. I think it's fundamental in countries like mine where we've suffered this kind of pandemic and we have to do depopulation activities, both sick animals and perfectly healthy animals. And we have never treated it from this perspective. The fact that we need to address the stress, the veterinary feel that stress because they have to be there doing these depopulation activities. So I think it's fundamental, yes, to be talking about these. And so I would like to congratulate you because I think it's fundamental in the one welfare approach because animal welfare and human welfare need these kind of approaches and the environment will also benefit. So thank you again for this very interesting presentation. For now, I think we have no questions. People, I think, are sleeping somewhere around the world, but I'm sure questions will come and you will receive them. So you will be able to send a written answer to all of those questions. So thank you again for your fantastic presentation. Thank you for accepting my presentation. It's been with great pleasure. So now we're going to leave the floor to our next speaker, Bas Rodenberg, from the Utrecht University in the Netherlands. He will be talking about one welfare in farm animal production, animal welfare in connection to human well-being, as well as environmental sustainability. So it's a pleasure, Bas, to have you here with us. So we're going to leave you the floor and
hello, my name is Bas Rodenberg, and I want to present to you today about one welfare in farm animal production, animal welfare in connection to human well-being, and environmental sustainability. If we look at farm animal production in Europe at the moment, we can clearly see that it is in transition. Societal pressure is increasing to move towards systems that are more sustainable, both from the perspective of animal welfare, environmental sustainability, and human well-being. If we think, for instance, about animal sustainability, here on the right-hand side is a picture from Van Zanten and colleagues showing a possible new way of animal farming in the future in Europe, where the animal is not fed high-quality grains that can also be consumed by humans directly, but where the animal is really used as a recycler of leftover products from the human feed industry. And this is a very different way of thinking about animal production, which will also lead to a smaller size of animal farming in Europe, but also offers perspectives in terms of improving quality of animal products and animal farming in Europe. And that also links to concerns there currently are regarding farm animal welfare. And there we also see that attention is increasing. And this could be a combined transition towards more welfare-friendly animal husbandry systems that are also performing better regarding environmental sustainability. If we think about systems with more attention for animal welfare, one of the central aspects that we should think about is the space the animals have to show their natural behavior. In these systems of the future, animals should be able to show their natural behavior and fulfill their behavioral needs. Here you see a list of the main behavioral needs that are recognized in farm animals. And if you think, for instance, about this chicken here in the picture that is foraging in the grass with its chicks, to be able to explore and to forage is very important for chickens. And so an environment that we keep them in should at least offer opportunity for foraging and for exploration. Yeah, so that is a clear example of a need if you think about laying hens. And if you think about other animal species, similar behavioral needs can be defined. Of course, in some cases, for instance, in this list, the sexual behavior in some systems will be very difficult to implement, but we can at least think about systems that come closer to meet the behavioral needs of the animals than the current systems. Also, the systems of the future should not allow mutilations to animals. So the system should be adapted to the animal and not the other way around. For instance, beak trimming in laying hens that you see here in the picture should be phased out. It's currently still used in many countries to prevent damage due to feather pecking and cannibalism. Also, keeping hens with intact beaks should be possible if a stimulating environment is offered to the animals which meets their behavioral needs. And I think scientists play a role there to translate the current scientific knowledge also to commercial practice and to provide new ideas on improvements to housing systems that will make this type of practice feasible. Apart from improvements in housing systems, very good management is needed to monitor the animals and to also act early in case of behavioral problems. Management of animals in these more complex systems is more complicated. So farmers need training and need support to develop their skills in a good way. A clear illustration of the transition towards more animal welfare friendly housing systems has been the Ndkh Petition. This was supported by about 1.5 million European citizens and by many European NGOs. And this petition asked to ban all restrictive housing systems for farm animals in Europe. From Utrecht University, we performed a study for the European Parliament to describe sort of the feasibility of this petition. Can it be done? And how does the picture look for the different species of farm animals? We focused our report mainly on laying hens and pigs, as these are animal species where already examples exist of cage-free housing and probably where things are most advanced. For laying hens, conventional cages were banned in the EU in 2012, and since then all hens have been kept in either furnished cages or cage-free systems. In the picture here you see a furnished cage. Well, this is a system that's still not well accepted by consumers, but it's because it's still perceived as a cage system. And also when you look at it from the bird's perspective, it still is a very restricted environment. For instance, the example that I showed for foraging and dust bathing, providing suitable litter in these cages remains very, very difficult. So if you think about improving these systems, you can, of course, think about this from a One Welfare perspective and use the One Welfare framework to think about an improved egg production system. For animal welfare, this would indeed be about meeting the behavioral needs of the birds, supplying litter for exploration, for foraging, for dust bathing, supplying nests and perches to the birds. And in this complex system, you would also not need beak trimming. For environmental sustainability, you should think about laying hen feeding, using more circular feedstuffs, closing the cycle, also thinking about the environment around the farm, think about dust control, preventing human health problems for those living around the farm. And this, of course, also links to human well-being. But in human well-being, we also think about that the transition should be economically attractive to the farmer. So the farmer should also be able to make a living with this new housing system. A nice example of this system that took this approach is the Kipster system in the Netherlands that you see in the picture here, which is an aviary farm with a large indoor foraging area where the birds can go around, explore and peck and scratch and dust bait. And also there's a small outdoor area. These eggs are marketed in small boxes of 5 with an environmental sustainability logo and an animal welfare label on the box. They're very popular and they're sold at a premium price, which also makes it attractive for the producer. This is just one example, and there are, of course, many ways to approach this type of integrated thinking about animal welfare, sustainability, and human well-being. In Europe, there's already quite some experience with cage-free. This figure shows the percentage of cage housing in different European countries. For instance, in the Netherlands and Germany on the right-hand side, you can see that currently cage housing is only 5 to 10% of the farms. Also in Denmark, it's going down rapidly. In other European countries, the transition is still happening. For instance, Spain and Poland is just beginning. But in most countries, you see a decrease in percentage of cage housing. Egg production is also interesting from the perspective that the housing system is very clear from the eggs themselves. So each egg has to be stamped with a country code, with a barn code, so from which house the egg is originated, and also describing the housing system. For instance, with the 2 here, describing an indoor cage-free system. And so that makes it very clear from what housing system your egg originates. In the report for the European Parliament, we also looked at sustainability aspects around the transition to cage-free, and we found that this was similar or superior to cage housing. If you think about switching from cages to free-range or organic eggs, we even saw that because eggs are sold at a premium, the farmer is well able to recover these investments from the higher price he receives for the eggs. And if we look at environmental sustainability and we compare cages with cage-free systems, we did not find large differences between cage and cage-free systems. And we saw that major contributors to environmental sustainability were the feed and the pullets. And although feed costs are a little bit higher for cage-free, these were similar across housing systems. Currently, we're taking this a step further in the Best Practice Hands project, where we try to support the transition to cage-free housing in Europe. And we share experience from countries and producers that already have relevant experience with the transition with others. We try to develop best practices based on scientific and practical knowledge and offer solutions that should be tailor-made for the countries that are making the transition. And we aim to use early adopters in these countries as ambassadors. So to conclude, I think that producers need to be convinced that the transition towards animal welfare friendly housing systems is feasible and that they will be able to recover the investments in animal welfare and sustainability that they make. I see a clear role for science to make information available and help to address problems. And one welfare animal farming may just become reality in the near future. And with that, I would like to thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Muchas gracias, Bas, por tu excelente presentación.
Thank you, Bas, for your excellent presentation. Many thanks. In the chat, we don't have any question, but I think Peter Oba is going to ask you a question. The question is that Peter sees that in Europe we are migrating or moving on to a cage-free system. However, in Africa, the situation is just the opposite. They are using more and more cages. How can we get to a balance between cages or systems, all systems, and animal welfare?
Yeah, that's a good question. We also see that cage-free systems are also picking up in other parts of the world. For instance, in Asia, there's quite a lot of interest in cage-free systems. But of course, this also has to fit with your local conditions and with the availability of materials and the cost of housing systems. It may also be necessary to think about novel cage-free systems that fit better with local conditions. That could, for instance, be constructed at lower costs. And of course, we also see the struggle when the human situation is still very much there's lots of challenges in the regarding human nutrition. That animal welfare sometimes comes at the second. It's not a priority. I think it's important to show that there are also low-cost examples of non-cage systems that can work well, and I know that there are several initiatives also to, for instance, in Asia, to look at ways how to adjust cage farms to perform as a cage-free farm without requiring a major investment in new housing systems. So I think that type of approaches is quite promising, because it also needs to be a solution that works at the local level and that fits with the farmer's experience and the farmer's technical possibilities. Yeah.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you very much. There is another question, maybe, which is the following. Is it clear an impact of these systems? What is the impact of these systems in the availability of products, of food, for poor communities that fight against high prices of food?
Yeah, it is a good question. I don't think in general that production costs have to be that much higher in cage-free systems compared to cage systems. I think that's also what we see in Europe, that the cage-free systems can perform at a similar level as cage systems. But yeah, a bit linked to the previous question regarding investment and construction of systems. You have to see which level of technology is relevant and realistic for a country. Whether sort of high quality aviary systems are feasible in every part of the world, or that you can also think about smaller group housing systems that are a bit more traditional, but that still offer the same behavioral freedom to the animals, and that may also be operated at a relatively low cost.
Bien, muchísimas gracias, Bas.
Thank you very much, Bas. We are going to move on to the next presentation, which is swine veterinarians, COVID-19 related depopulation and mental health. Our speaker here is going to be Angela Basinger from Merck Animal Health in the US. Angela, the floor is yours.
I am with Merck Animal Health, and I am the Animal Welfare Lead for North America. And I want to personally thank the organizers of the One Welfare World Conference, and am honored to be able to present with my colleague today, Dr. Lori Kogan. Lori, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, thank you. And I too am really pleased to be here. I'm Lori Kogan. I'm a professor in the Clinical Sciences Department at Colorado State University.
And we're presenting today on swine veterinarians, COVID-related depopulation and mental health. First, I'd like to give you a little bit of an overview of what was occurring during the early part of 2020 around the COVID-19 human infection outbreak. April 29th, the meat processing plants were closed or operating at reduced capacity because of human illness or absenteeism. The entire U.S. slaughter system was operating at 53.9% of its typical capacity. Because swine farms are raising pigs within a very regimented time schedule, the processing plant closures left pigs with no place to market or slaughter. Additionally, by the time processing plants created and implemented COVID-19 changes within the plants, the pigs waiting on the farms were too big for the slaughter system, or their welfare was severely impacted due to space or body mass density within the barns. Majority of the depopulation was done through April 2020 to July 2020.
Well, thank you for laying down that foundation. Next, I want to talk about actually what we did in our research methods. We gave an online anonymous survey through Qualtrics, and we distributed that with the help of the American Association of Swine Veterinarians and also state veterinarians. We were looking at swine vets that practice veterinary medicine in the United States. We gave this out in December and January, and this was approved by the IRB board at Colorado State University. So we included several different aspects to the survey that I'm just going to go through real briefly. And so a lot of demographic questions so that we knew exactly who we were surveying. So things like age and sex and marital status. And we asked a lot of questions about mental health. So their views about mental health in general, and then their personal experiences with seeking mental health, and then their involvement with healthy behaviors, coping mechanisms. And so that would be things like socializing with friends or volunteering. We also use several well-established scales to look at different aspects of mental health. So we looked at well-being, burnout, psychological distress, and resiliency. And we asked a series of questions about job satisfaction, and we did factor analysis to create 3 separate factors that really fit nicely under that job satisfaction. There were intrinsic job factors, and so things like I enjoy the work that I do. Environmental issues, so like I like my supervisor, or I get along with my colleagues, and then benefits or job factors like that. So flexible work hours, being able to determine what kind of work I do. We asked questions about depopulation, so not only their experience with the COVID-related one, but had they had experience before, and then several questions related to that as far as the period of time they were involved and the methods that they used. And then a series of questions related to distress associated with depopulation. And again, we used factor analysis and found that there were really 2 overarching themes with that. And one was the ethics of care, and it was really about the caring of all of the people that were involved, as well as caring about the animals that were involved. And then the perception of others. And that had to do with that public criticism and social media that was going on at the time. And then we also chose select questions from a questionnaire, the Events Characteristics Questionnaire. And that was to help us understand the impact of this major event. And so when we ran our statistics, we used SPSS. We set our p-value at 0.01, which is conservative because we were running a large number of analyses. And we did descriptive statistics of certainly the demographics and their attitudes about mental health. And then we did some multiple regression looking at predictors of well-being, burnout, and psychological distress. ANOVAs were used to look at that relationship between their involvement in COVID-19 depopulation and things like well-being and burnout and psychological distress. We also looked at the method of depopulation used on all of those different aspects that are listed there. So we're going to go through several charts, and I'm just going to very briefly skim through these because we have such limited time. There's so much information, and I really invite you that if you have time or have interest to go back and look at a lot of these tables in more detail. But like I said, we collected all of these demographics. For age, we ended up breaking it up into younger than 45 and 45 and older. We had about 34 or 35% females, And you can see these other demographics here. This is all about their job characteristics. And again, I don't have time to go through this, but all of those details about the practice type that they were involved, on-call hours, income, things like that. Remember, I said that we asked them about their engagement in healthy behaviors. And so that's what this chart shows. And really, we had a significant portion of this population engage in one or more healthy behaviors. And the most common ones were spending time with family, some type of a sport event, or socializing with friends. We asked a series of questions, remember, about mental health support. And again, I think it's really important to emphasize that a lot of people sought out mental health services, but there were a lot of folks that actually did not and felt like that they needed it, but didn't get it. And I want to point out this part at the bottom that we have, when we asked whether the mental health services were part of their employee assistance program or their health insurance, we had a pretty large portion of people say that they didn't know, which to me seems kind of low-hanging fruit for helping people access services. These were questions about their attitudes about mental health in general. And I just want to point out a couple things in this, and that we have about half of the people say that they're comfortable discussing mental health issues, or that they feel that veterinarians are supportive of other veterinarians that are having mental health struggles. That means half of the people out there don't feel like that. And again, I think that that's definitely some areas that we can work at improving. We asked about their involvement in the depopulation effort, and we broke this down into yes/no categories. And so these areas that are shaded here, if they had any involvement at all, we counted that as yes. And then we asked about the method. And again, we broke that down into two categories: the AVMA preferred methods and the permitted methods.
Thank you, Dr. Kogan. Now we will get to the key findings for veterinary mental health impact. This figure is an adaptation of the conceptual model of factors affecting clinician well-being and resilience from the 2018 National Academy of Sciences. We adapted it to a one welfare concept for veterinarians and the animals for which they care. The model includes three components: the nucleus and external factors, and individual factors. The nucleus, which is in blue, is composed of three distinct but related elements. The outermost ring is the veterinary well-being, which has a cascading effect on human-animal bond and then animal welfare. Animal welfare, of course, is the core of this conceptual model, and it can go both ways. Encircling the nucleus are internal factors, which are the green bubbles, and external factors, which are in a multitude of colors, are different colored bubbles. They all play a role in the veterinarian's well-being. Now I'll break these down into individual components. The personal factors. We've all heard about compassion fatigue, the negative impact, either physical, mental, or emotional, that can come from caring for others. In our case, animals and those who care for them. Sometimes this is called the cost of caring. But then there's burnout. And Dr. Kogan talked about burnout within our study. Burnout is related more to work factors, often a result of feeling powerless or overwhelmed at work. People who feel burnout often feel mentally exhausted and devoid of motivation. One contributor to compassion fatigue is moral stress. Moral stress is when you feel that the ethically correct thing to do is different from what you have to do. One example of this is that people whose work life is aimed at promoting well-being of animals, but they're forced to euthanize or depopulate, just like the COVID situation in the United States in the swine industry. Within our study, we found that healthy behaviors such as sleeping, socializing with friends, and spending time with family positively impacted the veterinarians. Next, we move to skills and abilities. The factors that incorporate the individual's learned abilities and or levels of training. And this has to do with the coping skills identified in the study. And we've already talked about them, but spending time with family, hiking, walking, socializing with friends, spending time in a hobby, exercising, reading, and traveling for pleasure. And of course, sleeping that 8 hours. Job responsibilities that impact veterinary well-being. which can be influenced by various demographics. And you can see a list of those within this bubble on the slide. Society and culture. This factor by itself had a significant impact on our veterinarians within the depopulation event. Factors of society and culture appear to impact emotional well-being of the swine veterinarians that did have to implement depopulation. We also talked about that the method of depopulation significantly impacted their distress, and that can be connected to the ethics of care and the perception of others, as well as burnout. Distress from the ethics of care is likely best understood within the paradigm of moral stress. Just because you know you need to do it does not make it feel right or okay. The distress related to perception of others is certainly understandable, given the considerable negative portrayal and societal judgment, and also the criticism from veterinary peers during that time period when veterinarians had to do depopulation. Then we look at rules and regs. All the depopulation methods reported by veterinarians were implemented based on the AVMA guidelines for depopulation of animals published in 2019. The AVMA, the American Association of Swine Veterinarians, state and national governmental organizations, and the national swine NGOs contributed expertise and regulatory oversight within the context of the standing laws in the US. However, since the depopulation occurred due to an infrastructure breakdown and not a transboundary disease, the US government had no authority or available financial funding to conduct oversight and or assist producers. Then we'll look at the organizational factor bubble. Harassment by animal activist groups and veterinary peer discrimination play a part in the emotional impact for veterinarians that were forced to participate in depopulation events. The lack of any prior experience with this type of event meant that supportive services were often lacking or non-existent. Something that studies like this, we hope we're going to be able to make recommendations to rectify for any future events that we may have in the United States. Practice environment. The availability of employee assistance programs, which Dr. Kogan talked about, knowledge about insurance coverage for mental health. We found that roughly a third of our veterinarians were not sure if they had an employee assistance program or insurance for that matter that would cover mental health. The stigma is still there. Stigma attached to mental health. Can veterinarians feel comfortable asking for or assessing mental health services? We found that only about half said they would feel comfortable talking about mental health with other vets, or that veterinarians in general are supportive of veterinarians with mental health needs. This needs to change. To sum it all up, recommendations for improved mental health for veterinarians involved in depopulation events. One of the things that Dr. Kogan and I have evaluated and recommendations that we are going to potentially make within the paper that we are going to submit for publication is education and training. Methods that can be utilized to increase the resilience of veterinarians, to increase the available support that is in the food animal industry, veterinarians and or producers that may be in a situation where they have to depopulate animals. Education and training for the mental health community to get them better attuned to what this type of a situation is like from a mental health perspective, because individuals feel more comfortable talking to someone they think that can relate to the situation they're being confronted with. Industry organizations need to provide materials that give social recognition or awareness of what the situations are. There needs to be additional funding for not only getting information out to the public, but also training offered for veterinarians, for producers around depopulation efforts. And these organizations also play a role for transparency of what occurs during these depopulation events. The government needs to have enhanced preparedness for depopulation events and enhanced materials and avenues for support for the mental health impact that these events have. Veterinarians, we need more peer-to-peer support. Being able to communicate without fear of repercussion from our peers is necessary. transparency of the event. We need to be able to speak about what occurred and be able to explain what the situation is, and ready access to mental health. Being able to let all of our peers, veterinarian producers for that matter, know that there are assistance programs that include mental health coverage as well as the insurance. So those are the things that we hope to make recommendations to the industry within the US around the well-being of veterinarians, which ultimately are circular with the well-being of the animals that we care for. Thank you.
Muchas gracias a
Thank you
ambas.
very much, Angela and Dr. Coogan, for an excellent presentation. I think this is a very new perspective and a very interesting approach. And we should be thinking about this more than what we've already think about this. I mean, we don't have questions for now, but Angela, you will receive questions in case we get them, and you will be able to write them down, the answers down. And now I'm going to invite you to have a break till 1:45. Have a bit of stretching your legs, eat something, and we'll have some incredible sessions after that. So see you at 1:45.
Bueno, estamos acá nuevamente para
Welcome back. We're here now for our second OWS sessions, are fantastical sessions. We're going to have now Maria Chen from the University of British Columbia in the United States. She's going to be talking about cattle welfare, which is basically human welfare, workers' perceptions of animal welfare on 2 large dairies in China. So the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, this is the Daily Moose. I'm Niu, your favorite cow reporter reporting in from China. As income increases for Chinese consumers, people are consuming more dairy, and China is now the world's 3rd largest consumer and producer of cow milk, home to 10.3 million dairy cows. My friends are increasingly living in large intensive farms, which brings unique animal welfare challenges and benefits. To improve the welfare of my fellow cows, it's important to understand the perspectives of farm workers who directly determine every aspect of our lives. I'll now introduce my human colleague who conducted research in this area. Over to you, Maria. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Maria Chen, the human researcher. In 2019, I set out to understand what workers on 2 large dairies in China thought about cattle welfare. My research method was ethnography, which is a way of understanding local culture through immersive fieldwork. For 2 months, I lived on 2 accessible large dairies, one with 1,500 cattle and the second with 11,000 cattle. I shadowed and interviewed 41 workers while participating in and observing daily farm work. I will share 4 main ways which workers viewed animal welfare: as cattle's basic needs, as additional benefits for cattle, as dependent on worker welfare, and as our ethical obligation. One way worker viewed animal welfare was as cattle's basic needs, using the Chinese phrase 衣食住行, or clothing, food, shelter, and travel, to refer to both human and animal welfare. A worker on the second farm shared, animal welfare is the same as for humans, 衣食住行. 衣 clothing refers to temperature, and my hot, 住 living refers to the stalls. If I'm not comfortable, then I won't lie. If I stand too long, my milk yield will decrease. Food, is it enough for me to produce milk? Then xing, travel, is walking. Is the ground slippery? Will I injure my hooves? The farm manager on the first farm also defined animal welfare as cattle's 衣食住行 and added, cattle welfare, don't see them as livestock. See cattle as your partner in earning. When they're comfortable, they'll produce more and we'll benefit. In this view, cattle welfare involves providing for basic needs, which can benefit humans too. A second way workers viewed animal welfare was additional benefits beyond basic needs. Despite the relatively poor animal welfare on the first farm, some saw cattle welfare as high compared to their own. The cleaner with the lowest wage shared, cattle welfare is living well, being happy. Here the cattle get treatment when they're ill, eat whenever they want. Cattle welfare, there isn't even human welfare. I don't even live like cattle. Their life is like the emperor's. When I asked him what he meant by human welfare, he explained, it's giving you worker uniform. At Chinese New Year, giving you some oil. This refers to additional employee welfare in China. I said, I think animal welfare is living a good life. What do you think is important to cattle? He responds, cleanliness, listening to some music. This worker felt it was excessive to improve cattle welfare, since welfare meant to him additional benefits like music, and because he felt his own welfare wasn't even addressed. Thirdly, workers on both farms shared how cattle welfare was dependent on worker welfare. While I observed several lower-paid workers treating cattle roughly on the first farm, the farm management team consistently treated cattle gently. A team member explained, servicing the people, servicing the cattle, that's all bullshit, you know. Our subsistence comes first. If you paid me like the cleaners, I'd mistreat the cattle too. This suggests worker patience may depend on first meeting their subsistence needs. On the second farm, living conditions for workers and cattle were better. One worker shared, they recently improved our meal plan. Everyone is more motivated to work. Cattle welfare is basically human welfare. Only when human lives are improved, then they can take good care of the cattle. As I worked alongside these workers, I experienced my own motivation improving, as the food was delicious and I even had my own toilet. Lastly, a few workers felt responsible for their cattle's welfare. The reproductive team on the second farm had the company's best performance, and I noticed that members were respectful towards cattle, in part due to the attitude of their leader. In a daily meeting, he introduced me to his team. Chen studies animal welfare. She's here to study about issues related to cattle's thoughts and experiences. Currently, humans are the rulers. Because of this, we need to find the way of nature, respect nature. It's a crime to be disrespectful. Only when you give a man power, you can see their true nature. Give a man a prod, a stick. You can immediately see what kind of person they are. We need to consider humans, but also cattle. Work with her using your brain, not brute force. In the beginning, cattle didn't like to be disturbed by humans. We first violated her freedom and captured her. Now we need to take responsibility. Cattle have souls. We cannot anger her soul. He viewed animal welfare as understanding cattle experience. He valued cattle as beings with souls, suggesting that humans should be responsible for providing good care. To conclude, workers viewed human and cattle welfare as interconnected. Workers saw addressing worker needs as essential to ensuring animal welfare, and cattle welfare as potentially beneficial to humans. Some workers even saw an ethical obligation towards providing good welfare. Back to you, Ñoño. Thanks, Maria. Moving forward, we should continue to consult the perspectives of local workers. Addressing basic worker and cattle needs is in the interest of cattle, workers, dairy companies, and consumers. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. See you next time.
Muchas gracias, María.
Thank you very much, Maria. Your presentation, the perspective is very interesting, and using the cow is a very good idea, reinforcing the importance of workers for animal welfare to be a reality. We need also to fulfill human necessities, otherwise it is impossible. Now we are going to give the floor to the second OWSM session, which is about antibiotic resistance in public waterways near industrial pig farming. In Canada, Spain, Thailand, the US, a one welfare issue. The presentation will be delivered by Sarah Eisen from World Animal Protection. Sarah, you have the floor.
World Animal Protection recently conducted a study to measure antibiotic resistance genes in public waterways near intensive farms in 4 different countries. Before going through what we did, how we did it, and why, there's a few terms to get to grips with. Firstly, antibiotic resistance happens when bacteria can resist the effects of antibiotics that would normally kill them. As such, these bacteria are often called superbugs. Antibiotics have been used to treat and prevent death from bacterial infections for decades, but as we use these drugs, bacteria have developed defense strategies to make them less effective. Superbugs contain genes that carry the genetic code that enable them to resist antibiotics, known as antibiotic resistance genes, or ARGs. And these ARGs are important as they can be transferred between bacteria in the environment. You're possibly wondering why World Animal Protection are conducting this research. Animal welfare is our priority as an organisation, of course, but it's impossible to ignore the interlinkages between the health and welfare of humans, animals, and that of the environment. In fact, it's a useful campaigning tool for us, since we can bring animal welfare up the global agenda and into more people's hearts and minds by showing the connections with these urgent global issues, particularly in countries where little is known about the importance of animal welfare. We believe that working towards solving animal welfare issues also plays an important part in solving other urgent issues that impact humans, animals, and the environment, like climate change, depleting natural resources, and in this case, the public health crisis. The next question you might have is why intensive farming? Well, 3/4 of the world's antibiotics are used in farming, and an estimated 67% increase in their use in livestock is expected between 2010 and 2030. Antibiotic use in farming, along with other uses, drives resistance and contributes to this global issue. And superbugs can be transmitted to humans by direct contact with the animals, through the food chain, and through the environment. In terms of pig welfare, antibiotics are used to prevent infection in very poor conditions on intensive farms. For example, pigs experience painful procedures like castration, tail, and teeth cutting, which are common practice, and pigs are often given antibiotics to prevent the wound becoming infected. Piglets are separated from their mothers at a very young age, leading to stress and a reduced ability to fight infection, which makes them more likely to get sick. Intensively farmed pigs are overcrowded, making infectious disease spread easily and fast. And finally, combinations of all these different practices across the whole system means that an overuse of antibiotics is inevitable. And we know this because pigs housed in good welfare conditions have very low antibiotic use.
หมูในฟาร์มอยู่แล้วนะครับเราพยายามที่จะชี้ให้เห็นอยู่แล้วว่าฟาร์มหมูที่มีสวัสดิภาพที่ไม่ดีเนี่ยนอกจากมันจะส่งผลกระทบต่อผู้บริโภคในฐานะที่คุณกินหมูแล้วเนี่ยถึงแม้ว่าคนที่ไม่ได้กินหมูหรือว่าอยู่รอบๆฟาร์มเนี่ยก็ได้รับผลกระทบจากฟาร์มหมูลักษณะแบบนี้เช่นเดียวกันครับ
We collected and tested water and sediment from public watercourses around intensive pig farms in Canada, Spain, Thailand, and the USA. We also collected groundwater near a high-intensity pig farming area in Spain. All samples were analysed for antibiotic resistance genes by accredited laboratories in those countries, and we interviewed local residents living close to these pig farms. So what did we find? We focused on testing for genes encoding resistance to the classes of antibiotics that the World Health Organization classify as critically or highly important to human health. These antibiotics are those that are the sole or one of limited available drugs to treat serious bacterial infections in people, or are those used to treat infections in people caused by bacteria from non-human sources, or bacteria that may acquire resistance genes from non-human sources. We found genes that encode resistance to the highest priority critically important antibiotics in all of the countries we sampled. We also found several other genes encoding resistance to other critically and highly important antibiotics. In Spain, the groundwater tested in a high-density pig farming area contained genes encoding resistance to 2 highest priority critically important and 1 highly important antibiotic, which we measured at concentrations between 5 and 200 times higher than baseline values. These genes are likely present due to the use of animal waste as fertilizer in this high-density pig farming region, with the comparison baseline levels being substantially lower. We spoke to local communities in Canada, Spain, and Thailand. A local small-scale pig farmer in Canada compared intensive farming to his own method of farming and the ethics of the system, including the treatment of animals. In Spain, a local resident described concern about the water use and pollution associated with intensive farming, as well as the impact on people's enjoyment of the outdoors and, of course, their health. Local residents in Thailand explain the situation in their own words.
เพราะว่ามันมีพวกน้ำยา มีพวกขี้หมูอ่ะคือมันเยอะไปผมลงที่นาปุ๊บเนี่ยงั้นก็ต้นก็จะเสียหรือตายไปเลยก็ส่วนมากก็ระบบนิเวศนั่นแหละก็คือพวกปลาพวกอะไรก็จะไม่มีอยู่ก็คือมันเค็มได้2 ปีมาฟาร์มข้าวมาจบเลยจากดินที่เป็นดินอย่างเงี้ยนะก็เป็นดินที่มันเน่าเป๊ะน้ำเนี่ยใช้ได้เฉยๆนะกินไม่ได้นะเป็นกลิ่นเหม็นมันเค็มในคลองเนี่ยเชื้อมันต้องยังมีอยู่เราไม่อยากให้เกิดขึ้นมาเลยเพราะที่ผลกระทบมันเยอะเส้นเนี้ยพอน้ำมาเยอะเนี่ยข้าวจะไม่ได้เลยถ้าเป็นไปได้ทำไมไม่จัดระเบียบให้ฟาร์ม
There is reason to be positive, as there are solutions that are better for animal health and welfare, the environment, and public health. In the UK in 2019, for example, antibiotics administered to Soil Association organic pigs was 77 times less than the average antibiotic use in pigs in the UK, and this is due to responsible husbandry practices that enable pigs to live better lives. One final important solution to reducing antibiotic use is meat reduction. If people ate just 165 grams of meat per day, antibiotic use in farmed animals could reduce by 22%. Going further and reducing global meat intake to just 40 grams per day could reduce antibiotic use by 66%. I'd like to thank my co-authors and colleagues in all the countries who collected the data under very challenging circumstances in 2020, and of course all the wonderful volunteers and local community interviewees. Thank you for listening.
Bueno, muchas gracias,
Well,
Sara.
thank you very much, Sara. And now we're going to leave the floor to our next speaker. We have the innovations for improving animal welfare and human well-being in low-input outdoor and organic poultry and pig production systems. It's going to be a presentation by Lucia Rocci from the University of Perugia in Italy. Sorry. My mistake. I just switch order. That's the one that we're going to hear now is the farmer satisfaction and animal welfare insights from a sample of organic multi-species livestock farms in 7 European countries by Lisa Sanz from the University of Natural Resources and Life Science in Austria. So sorry for that.
Hello everyone, my name is Lisa Schanz and I would like to share with you a story about farmer satisfaction and animal welfare in organic multi-species livestock farms. I'll let my friend who will help me with this introduce himself. You might have heard of him before.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had some cows, E-I-E-I-O, and there are some sheep as well, E-I-E-I-O, and some piggies live there too, E-I-E-I-O, with a moo-moo here, the cluck-cluck there, here an oink, there an oink, old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O.
Hello, my name is Henry MacDonald and I have a farm with different animal species, which is called the multi-species livestock farm. There are 3 different types of multi-species livestock farms. I myself keep my different animal species completely separate from each other. Each species has their own barn and their own pastures they use. My friend Tony keeps her cows and chickens in a rotation system, which means that cows and chickens use the same pastures, but at different times. And my other friend Ben keeps his cows and chickens on the same pasture at the same time. He says it's really interesting to see them interact. So all 3 of us are doing multi-species livestock farming, just different types. When my dad was young, multi-species livestock farms used to be very common, but in the last decades, farms have become more and more specialized. Most farms nowadays only have 1 animal species and 1 type of production. I will be meeting my friends Tony, Ben, and Lisa to discuss multi-species livestock farming. Maybe you want to come along?
Hey guys, good to see you again. Since we only have little time together today, let me get right to the questions I wanted to ask you. What do you think about multi-species livestock farming and how is it working out for you?
I, for one, am really happy with having more than 1 livestock species on my farm. It makes for more diverse tasks, but also more complexity in the whole management of the farm.
I would agree with you there, Tony. More complex, but I like going to trainings to learn more about management possibilities. And even though the work is physically really taxing sometimes, I enjoy spending the time with the animals because it is important to me to know that they are doing well.
Yes, the high workload sometimes gets to me too, especially since adding sheep to my farm, the workload increased again. But my family and friends are really supportive and help out when I need them.
I remember you mentioning that you added sheep to your farm a couple of years back. Did you end up putting them on pasture with your cows? Have you noticed any difference in the pasture growth?
Yes, the sheep share a pasture with my young cattle, and I noticed that the grass looks different. I think the nutrients from the cattle and sheep dung help the growth. Sheep bite the grass at a lower level than cattle, so the pasture is grassed to a lower level now. Also, sheep seem to feed on patches of grass that my cattle usually left behind, for example, around the cattle dung paths.
And do you feel like it paid off to add sheep to your farm, financially, I mean? Adding chickens to my farm was financially a good decision for me as I'm direct marketing their products.
I'm definitely happy with income. Some of my products I also sell at the local market, and I really enjoy the interactions with the customers and their interest in animals and their welfare.
This sounds interesting. I will have to think about maybe keeping my animals on 1 pasture together to make use of all the possible benefits. Lisa, aren't you researching multi-species livestock farming?
Yes, you're right. Me and my colleagues actually interviewed 106 multi-species livestock farmers, and most of them, just like you guys, are really satisfied with their way of farming, their work, their income, and their animals' welfare.
So multi-species livestock farming seems like a real good option to increase sustainability, doesn't it? Not only in terms of the soil, but also social sustainability, right?
We cannot really know that yet. In the Mixed Enable project, we did interview farmers from 7 European countries, but it was not a representative sample of multi-species livestock farms. We would have loved to do that, but to be honest, we do not even know how many multi-species livestock farmers there are in the different European countries, because they are not registered as such. Interestingly, the main points you mentioned were quite often mentioned by the farmers who we talked to as well. One point especially stood out to me. Almost all the farmers I talked to said that their animals' welfare is really important to them, which I think may be a big part of why multi-species livestock farmers are so satisfied with their work. We think that there is a connection between animal welfare, human well-being, and the environmental benefits. So what we would need to do is find out how many multi-species livestock farmers there are in each country and interview a representative sample to see whether the information we receive from farmers in this project applies to all multi-species livestock farmers. But I still think that the points we discussed indicate what multi-species livestock farming is like. It was really interesting talking to you guys. I'm sorry that I have to go now, but I really want to attend the virtual One Welfare conference. Thank you and see you later.
Old MacDonald had a farm, E-I-E-I-O, and on this farm he had some cows.
Muchas gracias. Muy interesante el aporte de
Thank you very much for the contribution. It was really good to listen to this song. So now we are going to have Lucia Roche from the University of Perugia, which is going to be dealing about pillow innovations for improving animal welfare in human well-being in low-input outdoor and organic poultry and pig production systems. Lucia, you have the floor.
Let us present you the Pillow project, which deals with innovations for improving animal welfare and human well-being in low-input outdoor and organic poultry and pig production systems. This presentation was prepared by Lucia Rocchi from the University of Perugia in Italy and myself from Ndkh in France with the Pillow project collaborators. First, why is it important to consider one welfare in organic and low-input outdoor farming systems? These systems are well known for the quality of the rearing of animals and of the products delivered. But there is still a diversity of practices throughout Europe and still a need to improve animal welfare and limit mortality in relation to outdoor access, especially. Why so? Because for pig and poultry, accessing outdoor, which enables the expression of natural behavior, also means more challenge for the animal. There are also ethical issues and the wish of practitioners and societal expectations to fulfill. And there is a need to evaluate the welfare improving practices by taking into account its environmental, economic, and social impacts, including human well-being, the one of farmers and breeders, but also the one of consumers and citizens. On this purpose, the Pillow project, which means Poultry and Pig Low Input and Organic Production Systems Welfare, was funded by the European Commission until 2024 and is coordinated by Ndkh. It gathers 23 partners in 9 countries that are France, Italy, Romania, Finland, Germany, Belgium, the Netherlands, Denmark, and the United Kingdom. And the project co-creates with 9 national practitioner groups solutions for improving the welfare of pigs and poultry in low-input and organic outdoor production systems.
The involvement of MPGs in the Pillow is required by the application of a multi-actor approach, which means that in the project there is a constant interaction between the partners of the project and the practitioners involved in the national group. That helps in the analysis and in the selection of the innovative breeding and rearing strategies to be tested on the experimental facility and on farm. Moreover, the MPGs have been involved also in the development of the two tools, the animal welfare self-assessment tools and the tools for the data collection for the multi-criteria assessment. Such tools will be used as the data provider for the development of the welfare assessment. Practitioners will be involved in the pillow in different fields of studies, as the dual purpose breeds or in farming system for soil, new feed or plant for limiting disease, and so on. All the different levels and strategies will be assessed to follow the concept of welfare. However, get the welfare approach into practice, it's not easy. Therefore, in order to have a true assessment of the level of welfare in real practice, we need a new framework for evaluation and assessment. The use of the welfare concept will enable to embrace the goal of sustainability with emphasizing the impact of innovating rearing practice on animal welfare and human well-being. In the pilot project, a new framework has been developed in order to consider at the same time the welfare concept and the sustainability framework. Here, the assessment framework developed by the project with also the participation of all the MPGs. For each sustainability pillar, several welfare dimensions are identified. Each dimension are described by one to several criteria. A criterion can be defined as a condition that need to be met or described in order to adhere to a principle. In that context, the principle are the welfare dimension. Because of some peculiarities of the different species type, criteria are different for the animal and economic pillar, while the society and environment pillar have the same criteria for all the species involved in the project. For each criterion, one or more indicators allow the assessment of it. An indicator is a measurable state, which allows to evaluate if the associated criteria are being met or not. The innovating strategies applied in the project will be also assessed using such a model in order to understand their potentiality. In order to do that, data have to be collected for fitting the model. For the animal welfare, data will be obtained using the PIGMO and IBENE welfare self-assessment application, which are two apps available and usable also, not just for the project, but by everyone who wants to have a self-assessment of animal welfare. For the other three dimensions, on the other side, we are going to use a specific tools developed for the data collection for the business model, but also for the multi-criteria assessment. And this is the tool built with the pilot partners, but also with the MPGs. All the information coming from the assessment of the innovative breeding and rearing strategies will be used for the next step, which means the training on farm, but in particular the change of management for on-farm implementation of innovation. From myself, and all the PLOSO's partners, thank you for your attention.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias.
Well, thank you very much. Also very interesting, this project. And I think it's also important to highlight that animals need to live for a longer period, not in cages or being able to express their normal way of being. I would like also to mention again that we don't have a Q&A in each one of these presentations in the section. We're just listening to the different presentations. So for that reason, without further ado, I'm going to leave the floor to our next speaker. It's also very interesting. It talks about suicide and types of agriculture. This is a time series analysis in Japan. And the speaker will be Mariko Kanamori from the Kyoto University in Japan. I'm leaving you the floor.
Hola, ¿qué tal? My name is Mariko Kanamori. It's my first time joining this exciting conference. How do you become interested in one welfare? In my case, my experience working as a cattle veterinarian was important. I had worked in a dairy farming area in Hokkaido, the northern part of Japan. The town is the largest producer of milk in the country. There are 7 times as many cows as the population. In the summer, the scenery of broad meadows and cows grazing on the grass is beautiful. After a harsh, cold winter, I often heard from farmers about community issues and health problems. When a cow gets sick, farmers are burdened not only financially, but also mentally shocked, as well as the additional burden of taking care of the cow. Also, the health of farmer is fundamental for farm management and the quality of work. I realized that there are interactions between the health of people and animals. When I was working as a cattle veterinarian, I often heard about people who had died by suicide. Some of you may have experienced it similarly. In many countries, rural areas have been reported to have higher suicide rates than urban areas. Farmers are an occupational group with a higher suicide rate than other workers. Today, I will introduce some of the findings of our research on suicide in husbandry communities. In Japan, animal husbandry has changed dramatically since the 1960s. As people's diet became westernized, the supply of dairy products increased by 3 times. Similarly, beef, pork, and chicken supply increased by 6 to 10 times or more. The husbandry industry has expanded its production under policy initiatives. While the number of farmers has declined, the number of livestock has increased substantially. Since the 2000s, they have faced additional issues of infectious diseases due to globalization, including BSE, foot and mouth disease, and highly pathogenic avian influenza. We consider that these structural changes in agriculture might have caused a great deal of mental stress in the husbandry communities. Therefore, we investigated the suicide risk of agricultural areas in Japan, focusing on the impact of the type of agriculture pursued. First, we mapped Japan's suicide rates and the product sales amount estimate by type of agriculture. The darker the color, the larger the value. Both suicide rates and agricultural product sales are unevenly localized. From a visual observation, in some regions, the distribution of suicide rates and the distribution of production areas were somewhat similar. Next, we conducted a detailed analysis limited to regions with a high level of agricultural land use. We used data from 404 municipalities across Japan. Here are the results of the main analysis for men. The secular trend in the suicide rate over time is plotted for each value of agricultural production output. The vertical axis is suicide rate, The horizontal axis shows the 25-year period. The left figure is for animal husbandry output. The blue line shows that the area with high husbandry output with continuously higher suicide rate than areas with a low output. The light figure is for crop output. Not such association was found for crop. Here is a result for women. Similar to men, the suicide rate was higher in areas with high husbandry production. Why do you think the suicide rate was so high in areas where livestock farming was popular? Further research is needed to clarify the mechanism, but we discussed several hypotheses. The first one is farming-related risks on individual mental stresses. Long working hours, off-season risk of infectious diseases of livestock, and high economic pressure are some of the characteristics of husbandry. In addition, social isolation, price competition, and social responsibility for food quality and animal welfare can also be psychological burdens. General social structures in rural communities and masculine norms may be relevant in various pathways. Exposure to the death of livestock can also be related to mental health. Suicidology theory suggests that repeated exposure to pain and fear may lead to a tolerance for suicide, linking to suicidal behavior. Veterinary is also one of the occupations with high suicide rates. Some of these hypotheses could be specific to Japan. However, in terms of the social context that people in the livestock industry face, I guess there are some similarities in other countries. Besides, do these social contexts only affect human health? I do not think so. Don't you think they could also have an impact on animal well-being? Here, I would like to introduce the concept of social determinants of health, which is important in my major, social epidemiology. Many health conditions are greatly influenced by the social environment. Health is, of course, related to age, gene, sex, and the individual's lifestyle. However, these factors are also influenced by the social network, socioeconomic status, as well as the environment of the living place. Furthermore, they are affected by macro-level factors like national policies or global-level issues. Social epidemiology focuses on the social determinants of health, shown in gray. I think that the structure of human society is also a social determinant of animal health and well-being. Both humans and animals can be influenced by a common social structure. With this in mind, I have now conducted researches on health inequalities, focusing on farmers or more broadly on rural areas. In the future, I'd like to apply this framework to animal welfare as well. Here are the highlights of today's talk. You can find out the detail of the researches on my website if you have an interest. I'm hoping that I can contribute something towards an animal and human-friendly society. Thank you.
Muchas gracias. Muy
Thank you very much. Your study is really interesting, and I think that it could be replicated in other countries where there is also high production levels. And we also think that suicide rates can be very high in different countries, and this is not always taken into account, so I think it will be important to replicate it. Another important point, or something that I want to tell you, is that you are invited to vote at the end of the presentation to select the best OWSM session. You can use different mechanisms, but you have to vote if you like after this panel. after the session. But now we are going to move to the next presentation, which is about agroforestry systems that benefit animal welfare, environmental well-being, and livelihoods in Ethiopia. This is going to be by Ndkh Petition, the International Livestock Research Institute in Ethiopia.
Hey, I am animal health researcher at International Livestock Research Institute. Today, I will share you about key messages of our project, which is titled as Synergies of Animal Welfare and Agroforestry in Ethiopia. So when we come to the agroforestry system, let's see firstly the traditional production system. So what is the difference between the traditional one and the agroforestry system? So let's think about the traditional system. So it is primarily based on the pasture-only system, and there can be a risk for heavy consumption of natural resource that can lead to consistent degradation. So this system also composes mixed crop and livestock production. But why we need agroforestry system than this? Far more pastoral production systems that incorporate trees, having benefits for animal welfare, the environment, and the farmers' livelihoods. So livestock systems that utilize trees to generate benefits for one welfare as a whole. So after this, you can see the figure here. There are a lot of benefits from synergetic relationship between agroforestry and animal welfare system. So here is some animal benefits such as a source of feed, living habitat, a reduction of disease mortality, and also the two system synergy has benefit for the environment such as nutrient cycling, biodiversity, carbon sequestration, and others. So this integration has various benefits. So the other thing is also the system has some risks like extra labor time for as animal health risk and environmental risks also. Here you can see like extra pollution of resources. There may be air pollution and degradation. So if we use wisely the system, it is very important to have benefit for the agroforestry as well as the animal welfare. So having on this, our project was established in Ethiopia to evaluate and demonstrate the benefit of agroforestry livestock system with the three domains such as animal welfare, livelihoods, and the environment. So the other thing is looking at the project sites. Normally, the project compared tree-based production system with the traditional mixed livestock production system with a selected study sites. So you can see from the map, here we have two study sites in southern parts and in Oromia region, and we compared the good tree access and the less tree access together. So the other thing is having on this, around 80 farmers were participated on the study, and around 358 animals also observed for welfare status from the two sections, such as from agroforestry and from less agroforestry areas. So the other thing is we have a lot of evidence from those systems, and I will share you an interesting experience from farmers from Bosawanche Valley. Farmer from Bosawanche Valley mentioned that, for example, he produced livestock. He planted different tree species like mango, avocado, banana, and such. And he also planted root crops and some vegetables. So he commonly gives food trees to the livestock, and also he uses trees as shade for the animal as well as for themselves. So the other evidence from Shupikamo village and as well as Wanche village, you can see from the picture how this agroforestry system integrated here. Also, you can see how agroforestry or forestry integrated with livestock. Also, you can see how trees integrated with animal and even with human. So it's an interesting concept, have a lot of benefits. So the other thing is animal welfare benefit agroforestry system. So here you can see some animal-based indicators mentioned, like improved body condition and creating thermal environment for the animals. So you can see how they mainly using shade for them, and so you can see how the animal body condition here. So the other thing is also there is a better accessibility in the accessibility of feed and water in this system, also better and accessibility for shade and shelter than the less tree accesses. So the other thing is also the tree waste system also have lower for skinny animals than the traditional system. So this system has a lot of benefit than the less tree accesses. So the other interesting thing is, farmers in this area observed as having better knowledge than the less tree access. Also, they have better access for this system. Also, they practice more than the less tree access areas. So the other thing is you can see food trees have a lot of various benefits like vegetable residue, root crops, grain concentrates. Also, they have natural grass opportunity in good tree access than the least tree access. So the other thing is also this system has some challenges like pesticide chemicals in with vegetables, also challenges like managing young trees, managing animal grazing, also have some lack of veterinary support here, so that need to be considered. So the other thing is you can see the less tree access have a lot of challenges like disease mortality, housing problem also observed here for handling. Also you can see how the animals also here pictured. So the other important thing is you can see from the picture, the difference is visible. So understand the benefit and the trade-off are actionable steps. So we planned to extend this through participatory training. Finally, I want to acknowledge my institute. Also, I want to acknowledge our partners, ICRAF and the BSF, and I want also our funder by within our research team members, as well as livestock fishery and the agriculture offices.
Bueno, muchas gracias nuevamente por este.
Thank you again for a very interesting point of view. I personally find these topics fascinating. We've been talking a lot about these kind of participations, and I'm very happy to see examples of other continents. And I think the example of Ethiopia shows that we're all moving in the same direction. This is not only good for the animals, this is also good for the environment, because as has been mentioned already by Daniela a few hours ago, this will help mitigate climate change by mitigating the greenhouse gas effect emissions, and it will also, if we have this option of having trees and having crops and how agroforestry can also increase the options in terms of livelihood for the producers. So this is from a point of view, of a social point of view and an economical point of view, is also very relevant. So it includes every single element of the One Welfare approach. So excellent example. I think it has given us a lot of information. And I'm so happy that we've been able to see a little bit of a glimpse of every single continent. So our last speaker in this awesome session is Santiago Henao Villegas from the University CES in Colombia. It's a pleasure to have Santiago still working in animal welfare topics and One Welfare in general. He's going to be talking about the differences in the perception of the equine slaughter as a protein alternative for human food in Colombia. So I'm going to leave you the floor.
Differences in the perception of equine slaughter as a protein alternative for human food in Colombia 2021. My name is Santiago Henao Villegas, and I hope you can enjoy my presentation. I am not I'm not alone. I counted on the participation of different people, led by John Bulfer at the University of Nottingham. I want to tell that all the photographs that you are going to watch and the videos that we have are part of our research project. The initial intention was to evaluate the the welfare of equids, but we realized that it is not possible to consider animal welfare apart from biodiversity and environment or human well-being. We started riding wooden horses, as you can see. We started to plan the places where we were going to visit, preparing the tools to compile and gather all the information with all the itineraries that we wanted, the places we wanted to go. It's a journey that we took in Colombia with different people to see agricultural work or work with animals. We started in this bus. This is a very traditional Colombian bus, the Chiva. This type of buses are very typical in Colombia, where there is a lot of improvement to be done to meet the Sustainable Development Goals developed by the United Nations. The end of poverty, zero hunger, health and well-being, quality education, gender equality, clean water, sanitation, plus the other goals, have to be a permanent task in order to contribute to society and try to resolve and solve the problems of it. Our journey, our trip was not easy. It was during the pandemic and during the financial crisis that we suffered. We found and encountered a lot of difficulties, such as new taxes, low employment rate, the impact of COVID on the economy. But these were not problems enough for us. We could research, because with the increase of world population, there are more and more necessity for proteins. We need to understand that for 2050, we expect 2 billion increase in the number of the people, the population. A higher number of animals are submitted to different slaughter proceedings, and this creates and generates strong and negative emotions. In this regard, we are going to work empathy. Empathy is part of our work, and it is understood as the capacity to link to the feelings of other people, not only people, but also animals. The objective of our research was to determine the differences in the perception of equids as protein alternative in human beings in all the regions that we visited. This started in Medellin. We went to visit different municipalities from the Antioquia department. Then we went to Córdoba, Planeta Rica, Cartagena de Indias, where we had the opportunity to evaluate and assess these animals that help tourists. Then we went to Santa Marta to share with indigenous communities some information people coming from Tyronas. Then we went to the center of the country, Villeta, Santana Boyaca. The instrument that we used was just that, the questionnaire with face-to-face interviews. This tool, was very useful to obtain 182 answers in Colombia. We researched the people like less to eat meat, and they rejected the slaughter of horses for the consumption of proteins in comparison with the male population. Likewise, we found similar differences between men and women when facing other protein alternatives in Colombia. We don't eat meat from dogs and mice, but we wanted to evaluate this possibility with our tool. Horse owners opposed the use of equid meat in comparison with people who didn't own an animal. The age of participants had no effect on the feelings about slaughter of horses to obtain meat or protein. Everything that I've said before, it's very important from the concept or the one welfare framework in Colombia, where equid owners do not have plans for the end of life of their animals. And this is the dynamic that we found. People who support transport tasks, construction material, or the animals supporting agricultural production. We also found animals supporting minery, etc. And the three conclusions that we draw is that women rejected more horse slaughter for the consumption of proteins, and that horse owners were also more against to the use of equids in comparison with people who do not own an animal. Owners do not have a plan for the end of life or the animals, which is something that we need to take into the future. I leave you with this landscape, these mules that are transporting coffee plants, favoring food safety of many families who depend on them. This has to be analyzed from animal welfare, biodiversity, and human well-being perspective. I want to thank the 4 organizations that have worked with me: Horse Welfare, Universidad CES, Arrieros, and the University of Nottingham for allowing me to take this journey effectively, finding different perceptions on the slaughter of equids for obtaining food. I hope you have enjoyed our presentation as well as we have enjoyed our journey. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Santiago.
Well, thank you, Santiago. That was brilliant, excellent, very funny, but also with a lot of information. So that's part of the reality. Also in Uruguay, my country, is the same thing. We don't eat the meat, but we use equids, working equids, for so many different activities. And we don't have the specific data, but the feeling is that people do not want to eat the equine proteins as an alternative for food. But nevertheless, again, now we have concluded our awesome session number 2, and you can vote the one you have liked the most, because there are 2 amazing awards for the best awesome session presenters. And now we have few minutes at 15:15, 3:15. We'll be back for our next session with Mohamed Nader, our next moderator and chair of the session. Thank you.